Great tune, great tune. Love that song. Let me read this to you by Andrew Jones. It's called Give Me a Story. You want a statement to sum up the mission of God? Go ahead. Find your statement. Make one to help you feel secure inside your safety cage of words, belted in by cords of cliches, locked up by logos lifted from Sunday school memories. But give me a story. Give my friends a story so that they are not sentenced to meaningless lives. Don't give me a story that I can easily believe in. Give me a script that I struggle to understand, that stretches my faith, that demands life insurance. Give me a story that will rip me from my career and pummel me into a quest beyond my capabilities. I need something worth dying for. I have most of my life left to give, but I need a story worthy of my investment. Give me a story I can touch and smell, a story with real people, a story with a face, a story with my face, my role, my place, my script, because I am pre-selected to be a player in a story that rolls out its plot in front of me in more directions than I can predict, in more colors than I can comprehend, a story that woos out my potential and calls me out of myself to be who I really am. Give me a story. Give me the story. Give me my story. Tell me that God is bigger than you, bigger than your statements of ink, bigger than your PowerPoint animations, than your projections or numbers that make you impressed but make God stoop. Give me a story that makes me gloriously alive to the purpose of God and makes me run without breath to keep up with His Spirit, that awakens me from sleep mode, that spark in me new thoughts, dreams of impossible feats, daring adventures, miracles of the Almighty God performed by the hands and prayers of backstage people in goodwill rags. You want a statement? Go ahead. I dare you. I double dare you to box up the omnipotent, to catch the Spirit of God, to nail the sun on a crossword puzzle. Go ahead and try, but I won't hold my breath, and you won't hold the mission of God on a bumper sticker. We're talking about stories. These aren't cute, nice little powerless Sunday school stories. We're talking about the stories of Jesus. We call them parables. And we're going to start talking about them this week. And for those of you that know these stories, don't underestimate what these stories can bring to your life with a refreshed look. That God can whisper to you something new out of what was already known or familiar to you. And for those of you that are new to these stories, I hope these stories are heard in a way that takes your breath away, that makes you realize these are stories that aren't simple. They're not out of our life experience, but they speak to us today. These stories that Jesus told are captivating. They're real. And they can mean something in your life today. And I'm excited about this series, Kingdom. We're talking about parables and stories. Stories of old that Jesus told. Maybe stories that were older before He lived. And we're talking about today's story, your life. And your life is a story. And it's being written day by day. And these stories sometimes come with twists and turns. They're not sometimes easy or predictable, but they're worth telling, and more importantly, my friends, they're worth living, because we have the privilege in this life to live out the story of God within us. And I'm glad you're here today. I'm starting off a little intense, aren't I? Sorry. Please forgive me, because I'm excited about what is about to happen in these stories that we're telling. So we're right at the beginning in this Kingdom series, as Jeff and Amy mentioned. We're in week 1. So if you have your growth guide, you've been reading, and you're going to read the story that we read today. In fact, this was sitting on my chair before I got up here, and I want to mention it. There's a kid's version the whole entire year of all of the Bible readings that we're going to have, all the growth guides for kids, and then a set for adults as well. And if one of you here, when the service is over, want to come claim these were provided by someone that just wanted someone to have them. So if you don't have these and you want these, especially maybe if you know a child that would use these, please come up and see me afterwards. I'd love to give those to you. But we've been reading all these stories this week, and we're going to read a few of these together. And these stories are powerful. And Jeff mentioned, I just want to mention it one more time, the Christmas Village. The Christmas Village, there were over 200 of us that showed up this Wednesday to volunteer and serve. And this, to me, says so much about Daybreak, that we love the story that we're going to talk about today. And so if you came on Wednesday and you said, hey, I want to know more, I want to get involved, I just want to say thank you. I think it was kind of an unprecedented moment for our church to see over 200 people show up for a meeting and say, what can I do to help? And isn't that amazing that we are a part of a church like that? Whew, just got the goosebumps right there. That's pretty amazing. So thank you for those. And if you said, well, I wasn't there, that means, what's that mean? You can still get involved. So you saw the website up there. But please, this is a gift to reach people in our community. So what we're going to look at today were some of the stories that we read in our readings. And Jesus here, from Luke 15, he has 3 stories to tell. There are 2 audiences present, but there's one message, and that message is that lost people matter to God. So we're going to briefly read these stories, but I want you to remember that one thing. That one message that ties all these stories together is that lost people matter to God. And if you've ever lost something of value, you know that it can drive you crazy if you don't know where it is. And recently, at the end of this summer, I had rode my motorcycle here. I think it was on a Sunday night, and the students were meeting, and I just thought I'd just come hang out for a bit. And I jumped on the bike, and I rode home, and I actually rode back to Byron Center where I live, and I know a couple people in the house are going to know when I talk about Houseman's ice cream, right? I went to Houseman's. I drove to the ice cream place. I was going to, I don't know if I was going solo or I was meeting Ariane. I can't remember, but I pulled up, I reached in for my wallet, and there was no wallet. Now, my jacket was open, it was unzipped, and my first thought was, it is gone. It's somewhere on the highway. It's who knows where it is. And so I sat there, and I went through in my mind, okay, what can I do? And it was about dusk, and I thought, okay, I can maybe try to drive back, but it's quite a distance in driving, and it was getting dark, and I'm like, I'm going to be out there all night. I'll probably never find it. And I went to bed that night, looked at home, couldn't find it, and I just thought to myself, it's gone. So you know the pain if you've ever lost a wallet, calling out your credit card companies. I always keep $10,000 cash in my wallet, so I was super bummed out about that. It's like, man, what am I going to do with all extra cash? And so I just kind of gave up. Came into work here at church the next day, and there it is sitting on my desk. But I tell you what's a little different is taking your daughter on a trip to another country, and your wife warns you not to lose one of your kids. And then you're in London with your oldest daughter, and you're on the subway. You're going to see a picture up here of beautiful daughter there. That's proof we're in London. That's not a fake background. And I lost her in one of the subway hubs, like 3 levels down, no cell service. She was gone for about 15 minutes. And I have never, ever in my life been more afraid than that moment when I thought I may never see her again. And I thought, not only will I never see her again, but I'm going to come home and my wife's going to kill me, so we'll both be gone. And the difference between losing a wallet and losing a child is much, much different. But these stories reinforce the fact that lost people matter to God. And I want to set up the scene here. And I'm going to read the first 2 stories. We're not going to talk about those. We're going to focus on the third one. Here we go, Luke 15. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Did you catch the 2 audiences there? You got tax collectors and sinners. There's kind of the bad group, the rebels. And then you got the religious people. And I'm just going to split you guys in the middle here for a minute. And which one of you want to be the religious people? Only one brave hand. Tom, you guys are going to be, unfortunately, somebody in your section raised their hand, so you get to be the religious people. Now, that's not all so bad, but in this case, it's not so. You guys are the tax collectors and sinners. That doesn't really sound much better, but hey, there you go. Okay, so Jesus is standing in front of two groups of people. Luke points this out, and this is important for us to understand because there are two completely different audiences here listening to the same stories. Then Jesus told this parable, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and he loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and he goes home, and then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. I tell you, in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. The story of something that was lost and now is found. Second story. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and she says, rejoice with me, I found my lost coin. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Those are really good and great stories, but Jesus here is about to really, really go after these audiences with this next story. This is where it really gets deep. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So they divided his property between them. How many sons did he have? How many? 2. Okay, just making sure. So not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, and he set off for a distant country. And there he squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. And he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And then when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out and I will go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and he was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and he threw his arms around him and he kissed him. And the son said to his father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And then his father interrupts his speech and he says, but his father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so they began to celebrate. Son number 1 finds himself on this road to self-discovery. You know, it's been said that for many of us, as we're raised, no matter how we're raised, some of us have this kind of inward longing to just go out and find ourselves. And that's where we find in this story is we find this son that says he's the younger son, which means he gets less inheritance. In fact, the oldest son got double what everybody else got. So in this case, with 2 sons, once the father died, the older son would get 2/3, and this younger son would get 1/3. And he wanted to discover himself in such a drastic manner that he said to his dad, listen, I pretty much just wish that you were dead now so that I could have everything that you are giving that's coming to me after you die, and I want to take it, and I just want to go do whatever I want. I want to live my own life. I don't want to be around home anymore. I don't want your rules. I don't want your life. I don't want you. I'm out. Give me what's mine. And what we see in the original language, it says the father took his property. Now, you got to know in this culture, in this day and age, this was the most insulting thing a son could do. It was dishonor. It was disgraceful. And that dad in that culture had every right to basically just kick his son out on his ear. And one of the shocking parts of the story to the original listener was the fact that the father would do what he does in the story, that he takes all that he owns, and it says that he divided his property. And that property in the original language is the word bios, which means life. He took his life. He took everything. To us, a piece of property that we may have here in our culture, typically, for the most part, only means that we're having a piece of property that's sitting there because we want to make money off of it. But if you go back to this time, this property was probably passed down for generations. It wasn't just the property itself. It was the meaning. It was everything behind it. And yet the father, I'm sure, had to rip his heart out, had to sell some of that and give it away. It cost him dearly to do this. And he sold it and gave his son the money and saw his son leave, and he lived this wild life. So we find that he alienated himself to his father by breaking all these rules within their home, within culture, within society. He said, forget it, I'm out, just want to do whatever I want. So we find his relationship with his dad is estranged because now he's just taken off and maybe never to return at this point in the story. And there are examples probably in every single one of our lives today of people, maybe your story, either in the past or even present. Those of you watching on Daybreak Live, maybe this is part of where you are right now, where you've just you're running. And that song that set us up, you're just out there and you're kind of running on empty right now. But I want you to watch this powerful story of a modern day example of what we could see what God can do in someone's life today who runs. Let's watch.
It was either Easter Sunday or Mother's Day. One of my boys came with a pack on his back, all his possession, with another friend. And he said, we're going away and we'll keep in touch. Now, you have one of your kids do that. And if your boy would have come to you and said, well, we're going away, we'll keep in touch, how would you feel?
I grew up in a very conservative environment, legalistic back then, and I had two very loving parents. My father was a pastor. They were a ministry team, my mother and father. Well, me and my dad, we had a pretty good relationship, but my father was, he was a very busy man. He was a community guy. He was a full-time minister, full-time educator, so the time was kind of strained between me and my father. There were three boys, so we were pretty crazy and how boys are. So it was pretty difficult as I got older living in that legalistic conservative environment. I was born in 1954. So I grew up in the 60s, and I became a teenager in the 60s. That's when rock and roll was really busting out, and that's the kind of music we loved. But we had to be careful about what we listened to. We didn't have a lot of media. We had one small record player, but we just didn't have a lot of ability to listen to much music. Every time we would take a family vacation, I just loved the road, and I loved traveling. I loved meeting other people, so it was a perfect combination for me. I didn't want to play the 8-to-5 game. I didn't want to fall into those conventional ideologies. I was really excited. I wasn't just running and not knowing where I was going. I was excited about seeing new things. So the first few trips were hitchhiking trips. Started out with marijuana, and that became pretty much a staple, a daily staple for me, and it was for over a decade. But it led into other things. I ended up doing LSD and cocaine and about anything. I would try about anything at that point. Those were not good moments. I was moving further away from God at that point, and I kind of had just basically turned my back and wasn't recognizing any calling from Him at all. All those years, it was over 10 years that I was doing those things, probably about 12 years, and I felt like it had kept me from being the person that God wanted me to be. I really felt the calling of God, and I'm not sure if it was that I just surrendered, or if he was really, I almost felt sometimes like he was saying, you know, your time's running out. you need to change things now. So I went to church at a revival, and that's when God really spoke to me. I knew that I couldn't continue, and God, I did not hear an audible voice, but I felt like God was very strongly saying, "This is it." So that's at that moment in time, I quit drinking. I quit all the drugs. I threw all the drugs and paraphernalia away, just pretty much in a moment. So I felt like when this happened to me, and I was at that point, I was 32 years old, that I did feel freedom, but I felt something that I didn't experience, I had never experienced before, and that was that I had a love for everybody around me that I'd never had. As in the biblical story, when I did come home, I was welcome. There were no restrictions, no regrets to my parents. They didn't bring up the past. They didn't care about that. All they cared about is the fact that I was back and I was home. And especially when I became a believer, I came back, and the fact that my parents welcomed me back had a lot to do with me growing spiritually. Part of my story is my family, and we believe strongly in family. We believe in supporting each other. We pray for each other. So it's been an amazing thing to me. I mean, I just feel like I went from a dark existence to one of light, where it's positive things happen, and God's there with us, and God's there for us, and just like any family, we've been through some hard times, but through those hard times, God has always been there.
I said, if your boy would have come to you and said, well, we're going away, we'll keep in touch, how would you feel? But you don't know what that feeling's like until your son leaves or daughter leaves. It's a terrible feeling. But he came back home eventually, and couldn't ask for any better Christian.
That a powerful story. So, look here, my man. This is my brother. This is my brother Paul, who was in that video, if you don't recognize him. And this is part of our family story. So when I grew up, he mentioned 3 boys. You didn't mention me, by the way. I came along later, so that got lost in the edit. But I came along later, and we lived in a really small house, and we shared the same bedroom until I was in first grade. You remember this? And you know, he said we couldn't, your parents were really strict. But I guess by the time I came along, they loosened up, because this guy threw on Jimi Hendrix every night in our bedroom. So that's what I went to sleep to every night. Axis Bold as Love. I'll never forget it. But what a powerful story. And I just want to, I want you to welcome my brother Paul and his wife Kelly that are here with us today. Could you welcome them to Daybreak? Kelly, thanks for taking care of my brother all these years. I just wanted to ask you a couple questions here. The first one is, I didn't send this to you, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's your favorite brother? In the microphone for the record here. Let's hear it. There should be no hesitation to this question.
You mean today?
Yeah.
My favorite brother today.
Yeah.
Of course it's you
Okay,
today.
good. All right. That's good. All right. I'm glad we got that out of the way. So, you know, man, it's good having you here. And so what did our parents do during those wandering years of yours to continue to care for you, to reach out for you, to show you Jesus?
Well, they were still praying for me, and I'm guessing, or I'm pretty much sure that there was a network of people out there praying for me. Dad was still a pastor, so there were a lot of people praying for me, and that's what they did. They supported me that way. When I would see them or talk to them, they were very supportive, and they were always compassionate towards me. They didn't change their opinion about me. They didn't show any condemnation or anything like that. They were still very loving. The love never changed. So they loved me then, at that moment, as they did in any moment, through our relationship.
So Paul, and this, we talked about this last night when you were here, and there's so many families out there, many families here, Daybreak Live, others that are praying and they're concerned and maybe they feel hopeless, like this may never, my son or daughter, grandson, granddaughter may never come back to the faith that I want them to experience. What would you say to encourage those parents?
Just like in the biblical story, the father never gave up, and I think me being a father now, I see both sides of it. I've got Kelly and I have 3 children, and I would just say just never give up and never treat them any differently. Don't show any condemnation, because a lot of things can happen through prayer and through time and through. If you show condemnation, there's chances of that relationship moving away from where you want it to. And I would just say continue to love them, continue to show compassion for them, and of course, never quit praying for them. I think that's one of the things that I can say about my story, is my parents never stopped praying for me, and Jeff can tell you that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, can we thank Paul for his sharing your story? Thanks for sharing that.
It's great being here, and I appreciate Jeff doing this for me. It means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it, man. There was, when I was younger, we were separated with some age, and my parents' bedroom was right across the hall from theirs, and I'd see and hear my dad on a regular basis, pretty much a nightly basis, kneeling down before his bed and praying by name. And we were kind of joking about it. He would say, Lord, help Paul wherever he is, whatever he's doing, because we did not know where he was. I remember being a kid and say, where's my big brother Paul? We don't know. He's hitchhiking or on a motorcycle or in the Grand Canyon or whatever. And you may have that story present in your life somewhere. Maybe it was your story, or you're seeing that story play out. And that's the story of someone that's just searching. And you just have to keep hope and praying and believe that God is going to bring them back home one day, and I really believe he will. There's another part of this story. There's the second son, and this is a pretty tragic part of the story, and this is what it says here in verse 25. It says, meanwhile, the older son, remember the older son in the story, he was in the field. And we came near the house. He heard music and dancing, so he called one of his servants and he asked what was going on. And they said, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. This second son, there's so many nuances, and I wish I had the time to get into all of them with you. And by the way, if you're interested in this story, this is an incredible book that I reread in preparation for today called The Prodigal God by Tim Keller. This is a great book. In fact, the voice that you heard on that video was my dad's voice preaching the last message that he preached at our home church a few days before he died. And He used this book to preach out of the same story from Luke 15. And in this story, the father again humbles himself after receiving his youngest son back, where he literally would do something completely undignified in that culture and run to his son. He was there waiting. I just imagine a dad waiting on the front porch every day. Will it be today? And some of you are right there. But now he humbles himself again and goes outside of this big celebration where his older son is dishonoring him by not entering into this party that he's throwing. And he goes out and reaches out to him to have this conversation. And you see the bitterness. You see, this son is on the road to moral conformity. You know, in this story, Jesus is talking about kind of two different audiences here. There's the younger son on the road to self-discovery, and this one's on the road to moral conformity. And this might represent some of us that maybe took a different path in our lives, where we didn't want to rock the boat. We stayed home. Just like this son, he was probably a very hard worker. He was dependable. He was loyal. He says this himself. I've always worked for you. I've always done what you want. I've obeyed all the rules. I've been here when you needed me. I was here. And this other son of yours, he doesn't even call him his brother. Did you notice that? He says, he was out doing whatever, wasting all your money, embarrassing you, and I was here. I kept all the rules. I did the right things. But see, he alienated himself by keeping the rules. That his path to righteousness, so to speak, that his relationship to his father was just based upon doing the right thing. And for some of us here, this is very much more complicated and maybe even much more difficult to see within ourselves, but maybe you might find yourself in the role of the older son in this story. Because maybe you've done the right thing your whole life and you think, that's good. That's good enough. I've been obedient and I've sacrificed my life. And it's almost as if you're using your obedience to try to manipulate God to give him what you want. But see, there's an alienation there. Because in this story, the father's not saying, it's not about what I give you. It's about us. Remember what the father said? He said, I'm always with you. You see how he talked about his presence there? Not about his presence with a T, but his presence with a C. I've always been there with you, and you've missed it. It reminds me of a gardener who grew this massive, massive carrot, bigger than anything he'd ever grown, and he was so excited about it. He was so grateful for the king that ruled over the land in which he lived that one day he went before the king and he said, my king, out of my gratitude, I'm giving you the largest thing I've ever produced in my gardens. And the king's heart was moved, so much so that he gave him an adjacent field next to the gardener to continue gardening even more. And upon seeing this, one of the king's servants saw what happened and saw the king's generosity. And so, not long after that, he brought his horse to the king. And he said, I'm giving you my best horse. And the king, knowing his heart, gave him nothing in return. And then explained to him, the gardener gave me his carrot, but you gave your horse to yourself. Some of you are trying this moral conformity path because you think it will get you brownie points with God. And when God disappoints, because of your alienation, you turn your back towards the Father that loves you. Because you've been trying to manipulate and control God. What's to me the most amazing part of this story is that there is a third son in this story. And that son is on the road to sacrificial delivery. You may notice in the first two stories, the coin and the sheep, there's someone that goes out searching for that lost sheep and that lost coin, and they find it. Did you notice in this story, no one goes out to search for the younger son? I don't know if you picked that up. But I think what Jesus is saying here in the omission of the fact that no one went out to do it was, who do you think's responsibility it was to go and search for the younger son? It would be the older brother. The older brother refused because of his disdain for his brother and his pride and his love for himself and his own selfish needs. And yet there was a son who took on the robe of indignity so that we could stand justified before God. There was a son that sacrificed his life, that sought after older sons and older daughters and younger sons and younger daughters like us, that needed to be brought to him. See, Jesus, that third son in the story, he recognized and he reconciled his brothers by overcoming all the rules. You know what's so sad today? Is that so many people inside the church and outside, inside a community of faith of people that have chosen to follow Jesus and people that aren't in that community and haven't followed Jesus, is that they look at faith in Christ as just a set of rules. Well, if I do this, then God will do this, and I'll make him happy, and I won't feel guilty, and all this. And that is so far beyond what Jesus really intended when he came to set us free from ourselves and the sin in our lives. And some of you today, and I just prepared today to say that I believe that every single one of you have a response today. That every single one of you here are a part of this story. Some of you are lost in the story. Some of you don't know Jesus. Some of you, like the younger son, you know that your life is wrong, and you know that you're rebelling, and you know that your life is way off track, and you're completely honest with yourself. And today is a day where you can make a decision to say, I want to walk away from that lifestyle. I want to walk away from that life that's going nowhere. And some of you here, like the older brother, you're lost, and this is what's more frightening to me, is that you don't know. You don't know that you're lost. You think you're good. You're here in church. You're watching Daybreak Live. You're obeying all the rules, and you think that will get you somewhere. And I'm here to tell you, you can be just as lost, in fact, even more so, because of the fact that you don't recognize and you can't humble yourself to say, I'm lost. Some of you are lost. Some of you here today are looking. Some of you here today are looking for a son or a daughter or a grandson or a granddaughter or a friend, and you are desperately seeking the fact that you want them to find Jesus. And you're looking, and you're praying, and you're waiting. It reminds me of a story that maybe some of you have heard, but there's definitely a twist to this one. You need to pay attention closely. There was a preacher, and in his community, there was a man who aspired to a musical career, but he couldn't control his drinking habits, and it lost him everything. He was an aspiring country singer named Clarence, and he lost everything. And yet this persistent preacher in his community kept going after him and inviting him to church and inviting him to Christ over and over and over. And Clarence never responded until one day, on a Sunday, Clarence came to church. And he came to Jesus. And his life changed. Everything changed. His marriage changed. His future changed. His relationship with his kids. And he actually became a preacher. And he raised another one of his sons. And because he was an aspiring country singer named Clarence, he named his son after his favorite musical artist. And he named his son Hank, and their last name was Williams. And so he had a son named Hank Williams. And Hank Williams grew up and he became a preacher. And Hank Williams came to our church where I grew up, where my brother attended. And Hank preached the day that my brother came to Christ. Now here's the thing about this story that you need to really pay attention to. Clarence Williams, Hank's dad, the preacher that was reaching out to him, his name's Clyde Dupin, who is the father of Wes Dupin, the founder of Daybreak. Now, how is it that God can do something like that? Everyone had given up on Clarence, except Clyde. And some of you here, you've been looking and searching, and you have given up. When I think about the Daybreak Christmas Village, there are people that need to be here because you are looking for them, and you are not going to give up. And some of you are you're just ready to throw in the towel and say, I can't do it anymore. It's too hard. It's hopeless. And I just want to remind you today, and I'm going to invite you in a moment to respond. I just believe today that God is speaking to people's hearts. Some of you are lost, and some of you are looking. And this story speaks to right where you are in your life right now. That's the power of the words of Jesus and these stories that we'll be reading about every day the next few weeks. So I want to invite you right now to just stand where you are. And if you're on Daybreak Live, I want to invite you in this moment to join us in a moment where we can just allow God's story and this story to intersect with our lives and our world today. So let me ask you today, are you lost? You know, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 20 people come to Jesus for the first time at Daybreak. Isn't that amazing? And maybe for some of you today is your day where you say, I know that I'm lost. And if you're on Daybreak Live, you have an opportunity, along with all of us here in the house, to respond and say, I'm lost. And I'm wandering, and I need to come back to my Father that loves me. And I want us to bow our heads for a minute, and I want to pray for you specifically. And then I'm going to pray for those of you that are looking. But for those of you that are lost right now, bow your heads with me. And everyone close your eyes. And I'm just going to ask you in a moment of just vulnerability, if you would just raise your hand this morning, if you're here in the house, or let us know on Daybreak Live and say, I'm lost. Would you pray for me? Just raise your hand right now, and I want to pray for you. I see a hand. I see many hands. Hold your hands up just for a second. Let me know. I want to pray for you today. If you raised your hands, I just want you to bow your heads and pray this prayer in your heart, a prayer of surrender to Him. Pray with me. Father, today I pray that you'd forgive me for my sins, that I know I'm lost without you and I want you in my heart. I thank you for dying on the cross for me. I thank you for sacrificing yourself. I thank you for being the third son in the story that overshadows the entire saga of this family, knowing that you are the true elder brother that gave your life for me. And I pray this in Jesus' name. And let me ask those of you here that you would say, I'm looking, I'm on the search, a neighbor, a family member, a friend, someone that I care so deeply about, and I want them to know Christ, and I want renewed hope to keep looking. Would you just raise your hands for a minute? Raise your hands and just hold them up for a minute. Let me see. There's many, many of us here. I bet every family here is represented by somebody who's lost, and we need to be looking. For those of you that raised your hands, I want to pray for you in this moment. Father, I want to pray that you would touch each person in their heart right now in this moment that raised their hand. That those that signified on Daybreak Live, that there's someone that they're desperately looking for, and they're asking you today to help give them hope for a better future. Lord, I pray that you would give them hope this morning. Lord, as a church, I just want to pray for our church, that we would be a church that's continually and passionately looking for lost people. That it would matter to us as much as it matters to you, as much as it can. That we would never give up on people in our community, people in our lives that don't know Jesus. Lord, give us the courage to look for them, I pray, in Jesus' name. I want to thank you for coming today. I want to thank you for your part in this story, and ask that as we go and as we're dismissed, that you would continue to find hope in Jesus. If you raised your hand and you said, I'm lost today, let us know in the chat. And if you also raised your hand, stop by the lounge. Talk to someone that cares, that can help you on the journey. I pray you have a great day. You're dismissed.